Chapter 226 Nuts. Part 3. Everyone, let's get on the bus, the tour guide hollered amicably as he waved the small red flag. Li Dian hadn't understood the meaning behind Yuan Liangtua's gaze previously. He felt as if there was something weird in all of that. This sort of feeling cast a shadow of doubt over his original intentions of having a happy vacation. Everyone queued to board the bus. Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu were at the end of the queue while Li Dian boarded ahead of them. But just as he set foot on the bus, Lu Shu stood behind Yuan Liangtua and shifted slightly. Only to see that with a flip of his palm, the head-twisting gourd appeared in his hand. He softly whispered a name before keeping the gourd immediately after. Li Dian. Ka. Li Dian almost twisted his leg. His neck twisted more than 40 degrees toward Lu Shu, who was blocked by Yuan Liangtua. The truth proved that as long as the neck twisted quickly, no matter how much it turned by, it will always be strained. The only question was the extent. Li Dian took a deep breath. The angle which he turned was rather small, and it wasn't particularly painful. It's just that. He was the original owner of the head-twisting gourd, how could he not know the effects of it? Yuan Liangtua saw that Li Dian looked over at him and waved as he laughed. In the end, Li Dian interpreted his laughter as maniacal. No wonder he felt that the person looked at him with a strange look. He was the buyer of the head-twisting gourd. But how did the other party know his real name? Oh yes, the tour guide had information on everyone's identity which was based on everyone's official identification. Under normal circumstances, there were a few documents with the tour guide. The most detailed ones wouldn't be revealed to tourists, as issues had arisen based on leak information previously. Basic information such as name, gender, and age could be seen. Private information such as mobile number and address were not shown to prevent tourists from being victims of scams after their trip. This sort of stuff happened very often. Some people would go just to obtain information on others and scam them on these tours. Some people felt that there wouldn't be scammers in expensive tours, but some scammers joined these tours on purpose because many people in these tours were fat lambs in their eyes. Li Dian suddenly realized. The tour guide gave them a form which required everyone's verification. When the tourists took the form, they could see the basic information of other tourists, so it was very likely that his information was leaked that way. The tour group had 3 groups of ages. One was young people and Li Dian was easily omitted from there. Another group was the over 50s who were retiring and had plenty of time. And he was in his 30s, an obvious target. Li Dian couldn't verify if Yuan Liangtua was the buyer. It could even be any of the 4 of them. And within the entire tour group, only when the 4 of them appeared did the compass in his hand have a reaction. Of course, there was a pair of siblings behind these 4 people. But there weren't any magical waves dissipating from the siblings. Also, the time they reported there was earlier than himself, there was no way they could have known his name. If Li Dian didn't have a misunderstanding with Yuan Liangtua, he would know if he went over to talk to Yuan Liangtua that Lu Shu was also a practitioner. It's a pity that the 2 parties didn't have the opportunity to have a deep conversation anymore. If Li Dian knew that Lu Shu had a system which allowed him to know the real names of others, he would probably know what's going on. But unfortunately for him, he could never know this. Li Dian took in a deep breath and bent his neck since everyone had made it obvious and that they were at similar levels after all. Although you have numbers, I'm already a seasoned veteran. Before the era of magical recovery, Li Dian was a feng shui master. He had traveled around for decades, he would be finished if he can't even deal with wallflowers like these few students. From Li Dian's distress, plus 613. Just as Li Dian was thinking, a middle-aged woman shoved him from the back. Aren't you boarding? Get off if you aren't. Yes, boarding. Li Dian boarded the bus with a face of awkwardness. Lu Shu looked at this scene in glee. Not only was he glad that he could get back at Li Dian, he even earned distress points through that. Back then when he had left the remains, he already discovered that although the Heavenly Network could think that the relic of the remain was taken by the Japanese spy, the distress points were earned by him. This meant that the distress points stemmed from the situations. Lu Shu contemplated that if someone pushed the blame of a situation to Lu Shu, even if he had nothing to do with it, wouldn't the distress points be credited to him? He didn't have much experience on this though. After all, no one had pushed the blame for anything to him. Honestly speaking, if such distress points were to really be contributed to him, Lu Shu didn't exactly yearn for them either. He wouldn't admit to or be responsible for things which he didn't do. Even if he had to gain from being blamed, Lu Shu wouldn't be willing and happy. Just like this incident with Li Dian. He evidently benefited from it, but thinking that Li Dian got to feel good about himself made him unhappy. With the same reasoning, if someone succeeded in pushing the blame to him, even if he benefits from it, that person who intended to sabotage him would be delighted as well. Lu Shu will, in turn, feel very irritated that the other party had succeeded. Lu Shu had always admitted that he was very petty and narrow-minded. Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu sat at the second last row of the bus after they boarded. On the other hand, Li Dian and Yuan Liangtua were next to each other and separated by just the aisle. Li Dian frowned and looked at Yuan Liangtua who was seated beside him. He asked Yuan Liangtua in a low voice, "What exactly do you want?" Yuan Liangtua was confused. "Are you crazy?" "I don't want anything." From Yuan Liangtua's distress, plus 113. Li Dian was seething. "Does this mean you don't want to settle this amicably?" From Li Dian's distress, plus 711. Lu Shu sat at the back as he earned distress points gleefully. He was loving the feeling of pushing responsibilities to others. It was just like using a cheat on a game, earning free experience points automatically, would you believe it? Lu Shu, who had already lighted up 6 stars, was annoyed when he thought of the 320k points needed to light up the 7th star. But this trip had given him much salvation. Great, the best would be if you guys can quarrel the entire trip. Lu Shu felt as if he had opened a new door. It would be alright even if Li Dian finds out that he was the actual buyer. On one hand, everyone would probably not see each other ever again. But on the other, he had not done anything using the gourd. So what if he's discovered? At most he would be more cautious when using the gourd in future. It was much more fun now that he could use it as he pleased. Moreover, it seemed like the tension and conflict between Li Dian and Yuan Liangtua were getting more intense. At this moment, Shu Li and his company walked over. As they saw Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu, it seemed as if they wanted to sit near them. Lu Shu wanted to lower his head to avoid being recognized, but alas, it was too late. People could often be heard saying that some guys cross-dress. The other party actually looked pretty good, an 8 or better. That's already very high, but the problem was that, the better he looked the more awkward it actually was. Shu Li was next to Lu Shu, with only the aisles separating them. He asked excitedly, "Is that your sister?" Lu Shu, "Yeah, that's right." He tried to be formal and kept it simple. "Male or female?" Shu Li continued to ask. Lu Shu, "Did I not understand this world? Or did I not understand your world? Shouldn't a sister be female?" Lu Xiaoyu couldn't stop laughing at the side. She whispered softly, "Is he interested in you?" Lu Xiaoyu? "Should we not spend time together anymore?" "Huh?" Lu Shu said with a black face. At this moment, the tour guide raised his microphone. A line from an advertisement says, "Follow the heart, and communications will be limitless." So I'll kick this communication with everyone off with a self-introduction. I'm a tour guide with Summer Tours Company. My surname is Wang, so everyone can get used to addressing me as Tour Guide Wang or Little Wang. An auntie suddenly asked, "Tour Guide Wang, so what's your full name?" The tour guide hesitated for a moment, Wang Zhenji. The auntie acknowledged his response, "We must be older than you, so we'll just call you Little Wang." After finishing, the auntie felt as if something was not quite right, or should we call you little, Ge? That's not right too. Wang Genji's face turned black. Couldn't he have a proper introduction without interruption? What's wrong with this group of tourists? You can just call me tour guide Wang, Wang Genji said, slightly annoyed. He took a deep breath and turned towards the tourists to continue speaking. I'm a true blue citizen of Qingzhou. Traits associated with being from Qingzhou would be passion and candor. So, feel free to approach me if you have any questions or requests in the next 3 days. As long as the request is reasonable, I'll do my best to satisfy you guys. Serving you guys together with me is Bus Captain Zhang. Captain Zhang and I are the best pairing. We could also be called the Golden Duo. So there is nothing to worry about when the tour is handled by us. You can relax, enjoy yourselves, and have fun. Upon finishing, the auntie was about to ask for the full name of Captain Zhang as well. But after hesitating for a long time, she didn't dare to ask. Seeing that Lu Shu was rather apprehensive of him, Shu Li was delighted. He had seen this situation quite often previously. Do you think that I'm very strange? Lu Shu thought for a moment. Regardless of what he liked to do or who he was, Lu Shu felt that he shouldn't make it awkward for him as Shu Li displayed kind intentions towards him. As to his own hobbies and what he liked to do, even if you didn't like it, you didn't have to voice it out. Everyone had his own personality and is entitled to his own opinion and choice. He pondered for a moment before saying, I just feel that. Psychologically, is it really tolerable? I don't have any other meaning. I'm purely curious. At that moment, Shu Li was amused. She whipped out her identification card and showed it to Lu Shu. I'm actually a girl. It's just that my voice is rather low, so my brother would call me brother. Lu Shu suddenly felt that the world outside was too complicated. Nuts. Chapter 227, Kumbha Monastery, Part 1. Lu Shu looked at the other party's identification card seriously. This university student Shu Li's full name was actually Wang Shuli. Lu Shu felt that there was something weird with this name previously. Shu Li was a name derived from a poem. Shu represented grain, while Li meant lush and flourishing. Most people never heard of the words Shu Li, but many people would have heard the lines of this poem. Lu Shu thought that the person who came up with this name for a girl must have been really depressed. He looked at the gender twice to confirm it before heaving a sigh of relief. It was good that she was a girl, or it would be an extremely arduous experience to sit beside a cross-dresser for the next 9 days. Although Lu Shu respected the decision of cross-dressers, he really couldn't accept it in his heart. Wang Shuli and her company were students from Shuzhou Music School. They were out because it's the holidays, and she even conveniently brought her brother who had just finished his high school exams, and had nothing to do. Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu had always liked Shuzhou. Being greedy for food, Lu Xiaoyu couldn't resist the temptations that were in Shuzhou. Previously, when they were discussing where to go on their holiday, the two heavily discussed locations were Qingzhou and Shuzhou. You guys really need to go to Shuzhou to have fun when you're free. I'll bring you two around. Then, we could bring you guys for some cold pot fish, noodles, steamboat. Wang Shuli's eyes were glowing with majesty as she laughed while introducing all the food from her hometown. Lu Xiaoyu was salivating quietly at the side. Wang Shuli looked at Lu Shu curiously. Do you really not recognize me? Lu Shu was caught by surprise. I might be offending you, but I really don't know you. It's all right, Wang Shuli smiled. No wonder he thought that she was a guy when she had yet to introduce herself. What do you guys learn in school? Lu Shu asked out of curiosity. Music composition. Wang Shuli looked at Lu Shu. Which instruments do you know? Lu Shu stayed quiet for a moment. Does whistling count? From Wang Shuli's distress, plus 13, Lu Shu could confirm now that there was nothing suspicious about the other party. Wang Shuli examined at Lu Shu seriously. I thought you were going to say that you didn't know anything. Why are you so illogical? Lu Shu scratched his head. Actually, I can't even whistle. But I don't ever back out. I'm really curious. Aren't your parents worried that the two of you are so far from home? Wang Shuli asked in curiosity. Lu Shu turned around to see her slender and fair neck, with a beautiful black necklace hanging on it. It was mysteriously beautiful. But he recollected himself and shook his head. We don't have parents. I'm sorry. Wang Shuli was stunned and changed the topic quickly. Do you know that there are actually 4 Daoyuan students on our bus? Lu Shu pretended to be curious and surprised. Are you for real? Many people know it. They're not really keeping it a secret. There, on the 3rd and 4th row on my side. Those 4 university students. Wang Shuli said as she gazed at the front. Lu Shu's expression turned weird. Are Daoyuan students very impressive? Of course they are. Wang Shuli looked at Lu Shu as if he was ignorant. Some people in my school were selected to be in Daoyuan class, and when they came back occasionally, they'll be treated like celebrities and worshipped by others. I even saw a girl lifting up a podium easily. And the status of Daoyuan students is really high now. They are all second lieutenants now and greatly revered. Lu Shu acknowledged her words with an hem, but didn't know how to respond. Now that Li Dian was on the bus, he couldn't say that not only was he a Daoyuan student, he was one of the highest-ranked military personnel within Daoyuan classes in the country. Actually, Lu Shu didn't meet the criteria to reach a lieutenant previously. Chao Qingxi naturally attained the rank because of her contributions and her identity as a tier A prodigy. As for Jiang Shuyi, it was even more obvious as her brother was a big shot within the heavenly network. And being of tier F aptitude, the only reason he attained the rank was that he really handed over too many spears. And Shi Fei had privately said that initially, superiors wanted to reward him with training methods, but Zhong Yutong managed to get the military rank for him. In truth, the military rank came with resources. It was an advantage to have a higher rank in the long term. Wan Shuli, seeing his half-hearted response, was curious. Are you upset that you weren't selected to be in Daoyuan class? Don't think of it this way. You're just like me, and my dream is to write wonderful compositions and sing great songs. If they really did make me join the heavenly network, I'd be troubled over trying to reject them. Who knows if that crappy place has any culture groups? Culture groups. Lu Shu didn't know how to react. This way of thinking was indeed unique. He thought carefully. The heavenly network probably didn't have culture groups. In actual fact, the situation depicted by Wang Shuli was actually quite normal. Some people harbored dreams as they grew up. They might be willing to be practitioners should they be forced to give up their dreams in order to train. On the other hand, Lu Shu obviously viewed training as the most important in his heart. Even when the chi clouds occasionally caused him troubles, he would be happy with his training progress. And up until now, Lu Shu was slowly able to get used to controlling the chi cloud. He wasn't as clumsy and flustered as he was at the start. Lu Shu laughed and explained, I'm not upset, really. He was improving on his path of training, what's there to be upset about? He turned to look at the scenery outside of the window. Lu Xiaoyu was next to him, leaning against the window as she looked at the passing scenery with intense curiosity. The scenery was ever-changing as the woods morphed into crisp, green plains. Occasionally, even cattle and sheep could be seen eating the grass on the plains. The plains were different from their expectations. The plains one often imagined would be flat and endless. And over here, it was more like green mountains with humps and bumps. Lu Shu suddenly thought. He was indeed an important figure of Daoyuan class in the eyes of an ordinary person. But over here, no one knew about him killing countless skeletons in the remains. Neither did anyone here know how flamboyant he looked with all those gold chains and watches previously. Since his destiny had changed, he had to be determined on his path. Although Lu Shu didn't say that he was upset, Wang Shuli felt that something was wrong. He had a look of frustration, but she decided against continuing on that subject. After all, not bringing up depressing topics is a form of courtesy. But she was becoming more curious on whether Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu were orphans. Isn't it extremely arduous for a brother to raise his sister on his own? But it didn't seem like it. If it was really extremely arduous, they wouldn't be able to afford to come on this holiday. Chapter 228, Come, Let's Harm Each Other, Part 2. The tour guide laughed along the way. We're about to arrive at Kumbum Monastery, which is located on Lotus Hill in the southwestern part of Ruzhou Town in Yuzhong County of Qinghai Province. It is one of the 6 monasteries of the Gelug sect of Tibetan Buddhism in China. It is not merely a temple, as Kumbum Monastery is also the highest Buddhist institute in Qingzhou. Lu Shu pondered for a moment. He suddenly thought of a question when he heard this. Were there practitioners at Kumbum Monastery? In truth, he had never seen great religious practitioners, and he wondered if he would chance upon one here. Just then, a momentary disturbance erupted from one of the front rows. Lu Shu turned his gaze over only to see Yuan Liangtua standing up in the middle of the aisle scratching his back profusely, as if it was extremely itchy. He was scratching as he removed his shirt. Lu Xiaoyu looked at Lu Shu with suspicion. Did you do it? Lu Shu, seeing as the distress points from Yuan Liangtua were increasing, understood the situation. He whispered, It's that uncle beside him. Nothing to do with you? Lu Xiaoyu was rather suspicious. Every time something abnormal occurred, there was a 90% chance that it would be related to Lu Shu. Lu Shu laughed and replied, I'll tell you at night when we get back. Li Dian, who was next to Yuan Liangtua, smiled and asked, Brother, what's with you? Did the poor quality of the clothes cause you to be sensitive? But you have to concede to it since you already bought it. Lu Shu would have understood Li Dian's hint if he was next to him. But Yuan Liangtua had a look of confusion, thinking what in the world this man was saying. Are you done with saying so much random stuff just because you have nothing to do? In the end, the tour guide walked to Yuan Liangtua's side. Yuan Liangtua stopped immediately and looked surprised. It was suddenly very itchy just now, but it's all right now. The tour guide? Are you kidding me? The first thing everyone did upon alighting was not to charge into the Kumbum Monastery, but to go to the toilet. Lu Shu walked behind the crowd and the tour guide informed everyone to gather once they were done with the toilet. He suddenly noticed that Li Dian was humming a tune in front of him as if he was in a good mood. Lu Shu was rather annoyed seeing that he was so happy. If Yuan Liangtua swapped positions with him previously, then wouldn't he have fallen for Li Dian's trick? So you think it's fair that you can sell knockoff and fake goods? Lu Shu felt that before the dawn of the magical era, there was an 80% chance that this guy was a scammer. Li Dian just gave Yuan Liangtua a small punishment and he felt right. He then pushed open the door of a stall and went in to take a dump. Lu Shu gazed at Yuan Liangtua behind him, who also entered a stall to take a dump. Then, Yuan Liangtua's voice could be heard as he made a call, Hey, Mom. We've reached Kumbum Monastery. All right, don't worry. All right, I'm hanging up. At this moment, Li Dian was squatting at the stall next to Yuan Liangtua and he heard his voice. He suddenly became wary. This kid came into the stall next to him on purpose. Could it be that he's trying to get revenge on him? Wasn't it just a gourd? Why are you so bent on this issue? Just as he was fully cautious and prepared. Ka. Li Dian's face turned towards the partition where Yuan Liangtua was located instantly. At that moment, he was in so much pain that he held his feces back. From Li Dian's distress, plus 666. Li Dian was filled with rage momentarily. It seems like you're really bent on going against me. If I don't show you what I'm capable of doing today, I would have wasted all my years of experience in this world. Li Dian withstood the pain and twisted his head back to prepare to put on his pants. Ka. Damn you. From Li Dian's distress, plus 777. Ka. From Li Dian's distress, plus 888. Damn. Li Dian almost collapsed. He wanted to go out and fight Yuan Liangtua without even putting his pants on. Ka. From Li Dian's distress, plus 999. Aha. The magical energy consumed by the head-twisting gourd was relative to how far a person was. The nearer the target was, or if he was a normal person, the less magical energy required. But Li Dian himself was a Class E practitioner. The other guy actually twisted his head a few times? Damn, it was even uncountable. His head was rather dizzy. Back when Li Dian used the head-twisting gourd on his own, he would rest after a single use. Now, even though he had broken through to Class E, he estimated that he couldn't use it without limit. He could probably use it at most 3 to 4 times before using up all of his energy. In truth, he was very clear that since the other party could successfully make his head twist, his abilities would be quite significantly higher than his. But this didn't mean much. Li Dian had experience in the world for so many years and didn't think that the other party could handle him just because he had greater ability. But he was rather curious. Previously, the needle on his compass didn't move very quickly. Now, his head was being twisted so much that he was losing his focus. Damn it! If his revenge was not executed, where in this world would his dignity be in the future? And Lu Shu was really enjoying himself this time. He was delighted at the eka sounds outside the toilet. And he also realized, upon experimenting, that as long as this gourd was on his body, he could use it without having to hold it in his hand. And he even tried it, but saying the name silently in his head was useless. This gave Lu Shu some slight disappointment. However, the biggest takeaway was not the findings related to the gourd but the distress points. Ever since the lighting of the 6th star, Lu Shu didn't gain much distress points. He never had a good chance. But with this holiday, he gained new targets. No wonder the old man would say that countless reading and thousands of miles of journeys would be beneficial to life. Indeed, there were benefits. Li Xianni didn't lie to him. Yuan Liangtua came out of his toilet stall and met face to face with Li Dian, who also came out from his stall. Li Dian wanted to flare up initially, but thinking that he did not understand the abilities of the other party, he felt that he could tolerate this small embarrassment and find a better opportunity to strike. Yuan Liangtua was preparing to leave when Li Dian said righteously, "I was wrong." From Yuan Liangtua's distress, plus 133. Yuan Liangtua was stunned. In what way are you wrong? This time, it was Li Dian's turn to be stunned. I've already apologized to you and you're still unhappy? Do I have to explain to you where I'm wrong? Li Dian's face turned black. You better not go too far with your bullying. Yuan Liangtua? What do you mean to go too far with my bullying? What did I say? From Yuan Liangtua's distress, plus 399. What's going on? Yuan Liangtua really did not understand what's wrong with this guy. He was yapping along throughout the entire journey. Now he even had to confront his weird nonsense? You're crazy. Yuan Liangtua turned his head and left before realizing that this soon-to-be 40-year-old man was following beside him, while staring intently at him. Chapter 229, The Golden Sight, Part 3? Li Dian also knew in his heart. He was afraid that these Daoyuan students would kill him. Since they expressed their hostility towards him, Li Dian could only keep his eye on Yuan Liangtua. He thought, as long as I'm looking at you, there's nothing you can do to me. I'm so smart. As Yuan Liangtua and his company followed the tour guide into the Kumbha monastery, his girlfriend Yuan Li whispered, "That weird uncle keeps staring at you." Upon the warning, Yuan Liangtua turned his head and came into eye contact with Li Dian. From Yuan Liangtua's distress, plus 299. Let's ignore him, this person has a mental problem. Yuan Liangtua had no energy left to deal with this as he and his friends quickened their pace. However, Li Dian followed suit and quickened his pace too. There wasn't a need for Li Dian to look Yuan Liangtua in his eyes as long as he was looking towards his direction. On the other hand, Lu Shu was trying to hold back his laughter. This misunderstanding is escalating, how awesome. He was delighted at the progress of the situation. As long as the two of them kept going at it, he could obtain 20k plus distress points. At this rate, he could finally finish lighting up the second nebula. How invincible! Of course, Lu Shu knew that these distress points were not long-term, but every bit counts. They followed the tour guide throughout the Kumbha Monastery. The Kumbha Monastery was built on the mountain and consisted of many temples, prayer halls, and pagodas. It was a serious and majestic place. Lu Shu, let's go over there. Lu Xiaoyu pointed to a magnificent golden temple not far away. Lu Shu looked over and saw a temple with an entire roof tiled with gold. At this moment, as Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu stepped through the doorsteps of the golden temple, Lu Shu glanced up at the heavily gold-decorated exterior. There were beast sculptures and bronze bells placed at each corner of the roof. The bottom of the temple was made of bricks while the second layer was filled with windows that highlighted the interior of the temple. The simplistic but yet ancient view of the golden temple made Lu Shu felt as though he was back in the past. While they were relishing at that moment, the prayer wheels started spinning faster and faster amidst this windless weather. The set of beast sculptures in the four corners began to tremor in solemn. At this moment, a reverend clad in a red robe walked out of the temple briskly. With a look of doubt on his face, he looked back at the beast sculptures of the four corners of the roof before turning back to the spinning prayer wheels, and the siblings standing there. His expression was all serious. The air in front of the temple was tightening and both parties were silent. In fact, none of them knew what exactly was happening. Under such circumstance, Lu Shu's first reaction was to order Lu Xiaoyu, "Wait for me outside." Lu Xiaoyu shook her head, "I'm not going, I'm not a burden." What was Lu Xiaoyu's training for? It's so that she could fight side by side with Lu Shu. Otherwise, training would be meaningless. The Reverend spoke, "You can't leave. You have to wait for the Rinpoche to be back from his trip." Lu Shu frowned, "Isn't the Rinpoche a living Buddha?" To be frank, he didn't quite understand religions. At the beginning of Daoyuan class, he tried to read up about religions, but the vast amount of information was too overwhelming. Subsequently, he aimed to understand the bare minimum without much in-depth exploration. But why did he and Lu Xiaoyu have to wait for the Rinpoche? They are free thinkers. What gives you the right to make us stay? If the other party was to force them to stay, even if the entire temple was filled with Class C and above practitioners, Lu Shu would still want to get out. However, the Reverend noticed Lu Shu frown and corrected his tone, "I don't mean harm. It's just that this incident is too unusual, so I was hoping to wait for the Rinpoche to explain." Lu Shu felt relaxed after hearing that. "We don't know what happened either. But we're part of a tour group, so we really cannot stay. We seek your understanding. Ever since this temple was built, I have never witnessed such a thing. There might be karma attached to you guys that are causing this. If that is really the case, it would be better for you two to wait for the Rinpoche's return," the Reverend explained. "I have no evil intentions and I believe that the Golden Temple has no evil intentions too." Lu Shu shook his head. "During the past 17 years, I haven't done many good deeds, but neither did I commit many sins. My conscience is clear, so why would there be karma? Since there isn't any, there's no need for anyone to explain. Also, I do not believe in reincarnation, so I shall take my leave." Finishing his words, he held Lu Xiaoyu's hand and left. This was the other party's turf, and if he wasn't so bent on having them stay, leaving quickly was better. Although his and Lu Xiaoyu's strength combined could definitely be on par with a Class C, he couldn't be sure just how many Class CS were there in this huge temple. Furthermore, this place wasn't under the surveillance of the Heavenly Network and there must be a reason. There wasn't a need for Lu Shu to find unnecessary trouble. The Reverend urged, "There's no need to be worried as it might not be karma. What if you two were fated to be here?" "Not fated. Goodbye. Lu Shu's face blackened. What fate? I much preferred the outside world. The Reverend was hoping for the two of them to stay, but after seeing their resolve, he could only remain speechless. Confused, he watched the 2 rows of prayer wheels slowly stopping as the two of them left the temple. Even the beast sculptures had calmed down. Everything was back to normal. He concluded that this unusual sighting much is related to those two, but whether it was because of the brother or sister, he wasn't sure. He can only wait for the Rinpoche's return. Lu Shu held Lu Xiaoyu's hand and headed back to their tour group. On the way, Lu Xiaoyu asked curiously, Lu Shu, what is the karma he mentioned? Simply put, it's evil deeds. Lu Shu didn't expect it either, but didn't he also say that it might not be karma? And since we haven't done anything evil, it should be a good thing. Lu Shu, don't you ever become a monk? Lu Xiaoyu stopped walking and said seriously. What monk? Am I that kind of person? Lu Shu didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Chapter 230. Lu Shu, was that a good or bad guy just now? Lu Xiaoyu didn't understand. Lu Shu thought for a moment, I really can't judge. The only thing I can confirm is that he's not the same as us. Lu Xiaoyu stated righteously, you'll be done for if you're the same as him. Lu Shu couldn't help but look back as he walked out of the Golden Temple. He felt as if those beast sculptures on the corners of the roof had an inexplicable hostility towards him. But why so? He always had a clear conscience. Even if he really did some stuff, it was only to provoke others. He never stole or robbed, and counted on his own efforts to feed Lu Xiaoyu and himself. The past 17 years, no matter how tough they were, came without any of your help. And you guys, what right do you have to be so hostile towards me? If he was really embroiled in deep trouble, he still wouldn't need anyone to save him. He originally came to Kumbum Monastery in a good mood, but because of this sort of incident, Lu Shu actually felt unwilling to continue his visit in the monastery. Lu Shu could feel the energy waves from that reverend, and he was approximately at the middle stages of Class D, just as he had thought. There were indeed practitioners in this monastery. He wondered what level the said Rinpoche could be. Could it possibly be a great Class B practitioner? He turned around and walked out, holding on to Lu Xiaoyu's little hand. At this moment, other tourists had already finished their sightseeing and were walking out. Wang Shuli waved at Lu Shu excitedly, little Shu, little you, where did you guys go just now? We went somewhere else to explore. Lu Shu smiled as he explained, what made you so happy? I met a master inside and he said that my wishes will definitely be fulfilled this year, Wang Shuli exclaimed with a smile. Lu Shu froze for a moment. There was such a service within Kumbum Monastery? Why did he not hear about it? Wang Shuli knew what he was thinking when she saw the look on his face. He didn't collect money, it was just him saying conveniently. He wouldn't even respond to queries from other people. I think it's very reliable. Oh. Lu Shu nodded his head, so what's your wish this year? Wang Shuli looked at him, to sing. At this moment, Yuan Liangtua and his company emerged as well with Li Dian following closely. His gaze was fixated on Yuan Liangtua's back, and he rubbed his sore neck from time to time. Lu Shu grinned as it seemed like the chain of head-twisting back in the toilet had scared this man. Why come to this stage when you'd have predicted it earlier? Even if you said what it really did, you might still be able to sell it. And now that the owner had looked for you, you're playing dirty. This sort of habit is really not decent. In reality, Lu Shu had heard Uncle Li mention previously that most people who spent time in the harsh reality of society would learn to be scrupulous gradually. Some of them would become scammers, or they might find it difficult to continue surviving. Now that Lu Shu had encountered someone like Li Dian, he really experienced it for himself. Li Dian exuded a tinge of evil aura. He couldn't stare at Yuan Liangtua forever. Even if he could stare at him now, what would happen when they split into their rooms at night? He felt the need for him to communicate with Yuan Liangtua. Being in the harsh reality of society for so many years, Li Dian actually wouldn't dare to murder anyone. After all, in a time of peace, laws were strictly abided to in societies. Those criminals who took lives without much hesitation were considered the minority. Murderers were still considered common in the 80s and 90s, but much less nowadays. Moreover, Li Dian had never killed anyone in his lifetime. He would never be on that train of thought when handling incidents. He was now rather puzzled. This Daoyuan student called Yuan Liangtua. Was he really so bent on going against him? Li Dian looked at the sky in frustration. They were 5 to 6 hours away from sunset. He had to resolve this question within the next 5 to 6 hours. But at the moment when he raised his head, "Ka!" the sound of a crunch caused the people next to him to turn towards him. Hiss! Li Dian took a cold breath. His pain almost caused him to cry, "Damn! What resolution? What communication? Nonsense! I won't die peacefully if I don't get back at you." From Li Dian's distress, plus 888. And just at that moment, while Li Dian was getting pumped with rage, Lu Shu stood at a hidden corner and murmured Li Dian's name continuously. Everyone was confused. Is this epilepsy or something? Yuan Liangtua looked confused as well. He had annoyed this person for a long time, and seeing this person as such, he shouted, "Zhao Si, is that you?" Zhao Si. From Li Dian's distress, plus 999. Lu Shu stopped just as Yuan Liangtua was about to open his mouth, or else Li Dian would have noticed something wrong. In the end, Yuan Liangtua couldn't stop visiting the toilet after lunch. Lu Shu estimated that Yuan Liangtua probably went to the toilet about 6 to 7 times in the short span of an hour. Even a practitioner would have been weakened by that. At that moment, Lu Shu was rather shocked. He didn't notice when Li Dian actually spiked Yuan Liangtua with laxatives, and these laxatives had really fierce and harsh effects. It all came down to him placing the blame on someone else, or he would have been the one visiting the toilet. Although today was a mere half day, he gained more than 10,000 distress points. As he evaluated the small progress he made towards collecting the last 320k distress points to light up the second nebula, he noticed that he was short of 250k points. Ever since the start of this holiday, Lu Shu couldn't train at night. He just couldn't bring himself to sing Twinkle Stars in front of Lu Xiaoyu. Lu Shu obviously understood Lu Xiaoyu the best. If she learns of Lu Shu's training method of singing Twinkle Stars, he would be laughed at and ridiculed for more than a year. Lu Xiaoyu even asked last night, "Lu Shu, you don't have to train every day as well? You can sleep?" Lu Shu said indifferently without a hint of change in expression, "Of course, I'm your brother. Why would I be weaker than you? I don't have to train as well, I can sleep." Lu Xiaoyu shot him a look of suspicion, "Then what do you usually do up in the middle of the night at home?" Lu Shu hesitated for a moment, "I look at forums. I gain first-hand information and I have to be familiar with the people on the forums, right?"
Oh.
Lu Xiaoyu nodded her head, "So that's the case." Every time Lu Xiaoyu nodded, little fury would bob along on her head. Lu Shu could only relax after Lu Xiaoyu stopped harping on this topic. His authority as a brother almost wavered. Yuan Liangtua had diarrhea in the afternoon. After lunch, the entire tour group's schedule was affected. As the bus traveled on the road, it had to stop occasionally for him to go to the toilet. It would be negligible if they were on one of those luxury buses with a toilet. Unfortunately, this bus was pretty basic and simple.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, and we just putting on the show. Try to look to